Hi, I'm Sangeet. Welcome to my videos. In this series we are going to be looking at flat moulds and how to run them and how to apply them. This video is one of three where I'm just going to be introducing the kit and the materials that we're going to be using and going over how to encapsulate our silicone mould. We're going to be making some flat mould wounds today, so we're going to be using my Studio Sangeet flat mould transfer system. This set is the triple shot SMG, which includes 6 moulds in total. Here we have a selection of bullet wounds and some shrapnel wounds as well. Now the nice thing about this particular set is we've got some bigger pieces and deeper pieces which are great for silicone, and some smaller pieces which are great for Bondo. Now in this video we're just going to be concentrating on using silicone for filling these moulds. So we have 6 steps to this process: check and prep, encapsulate, mix and pour, scrape and clean, trim and glue, and apply and paint. Okay, so we're going to start with recommended materials. So here we have our release agents. Now I do recommend using branded Vaseline and not a cheaper alternative. I've had problems from that in the past. Here we have Ultra 4, which is a paintable mould release. So that means that this will go into our moulds, transfer onto the appliance itself, but still allow us to put paint onto it. Here we have cap plastic. Now I have pre-coloured my cap plastic with some oil-based cream makeup. Solvents wise, I always keep some IPA and some acetone in one of these squeezy bottles, which makes it very easy to apply. Here I have my silicone components. Now what I've done here, this is already pre-coloured with silicone pigments and flock. I have an A, a B and a deadener. Now another item that I've got is this blue tissue paper. Now it doesn't have to be blue, you can get other types of tissue. This is particularly good because it doesn't really break apart when it gets wet, it keeps its integrity. Here we've got some metal scrapers. Now these are sprung steel, you can buy them from art supplies places. I also have some digital scales. Now these are particularly good, these go up to 1 kilo in 0.1 gram increments. I do recommend having something this sensitive. Sometimes you're talking about mixing maybe 6 grams of silicone, and the ratios have to be very accurate, so it's worth having something good like this. Now these are wooden tongue depressors. They're kind of quite easy to get hold of. A lot of dental supplies places or sometimes even pharmacies will sell these. They're good. You can use them once and dispose of them once they get dirty. Here I have a selection of brushes that I'll be using. So I've got some pipe cleaning brushes for keeping your airbrush clean. I have a cut down chip brush which I use for cleaning my moulds. Here I have 2 brushes that I've kind of labelled CP and PG. So CP for cap plastic and PG for plat gel, in case I need to brush some on, and I use this for brushing in detail. I have another brush that I keep just for applying Vaseline, if and when I need to. And I have another small brush, a small fine brush for trimming. Now what I also have here is my Pache H airbrush. This is a single action airbrush, which means that just by pressing there I get airflow and it draws the paint through. These are really good because they're quite easy to maintain and clean. There's no internal moving parts, so when this end gets clogged up it's quite easy for me to just take apart this assembly and clean the airbrush. So then another important thing to use is gloves to keep your hands clean and your workspace uncontaminated. Now it's important to remember that only use vinyl or nitrile gloves, not latex. Latex will inhibit the cure process of your silicone and cause you lots of problems. So avoid keeping latex anywhere near your workspace. Now this is a fairly decent spirit level, but you can get cheaper ones elsewhere. What I also have is some cotton buds for cleaning the edges of our moulds. Last but not least, we have some paper cups for mixing with.
Step number 1, check and prep. Check you have all the kits you need, clean mould with IPA and spray or apply with release agent. Important, always work on a level surface.
So what I'm going to do is I've checked that my entire workspace is clean, clear of obstructions, and I've got all the kit that I need. I'm going to take my moulds out of their sets.
This is a good time to mention how I've designed this system so that the moulds will fit back into their case for transportation. I would just put a drop of silicone adhesive in there and then put my mould back in once I've run my piece.
And I'm just going to check they're clean. Now these are clean, they're fresh out, but I can see that there's a little bit of dust here and there. So what I'm going to use is a chip brush and some IPA. Now I'm going to give them a light spray and just use my brush working outwards to make sure that there's no bits in there. Now it's important to use a brush and not tissue, as tissue will break apart and ruin your mould surface. So our moulds are now clean, good to go, and I'm going to prep them with some release agent. Now the release agent that you use depends on the material that you're using. So today we're primarily focusing on silicone, so I'm going to be using some parfilm. Now you can use Vaseline for this, but that will transfer onto your piece and then you'll have silicone Vaseline on the surface of that, which will cause problems with paint and so on. So in terms of release, I'm just going to go very lightly, very lightly with this, and that's enough.
Step number 2, encapsulate. Brush over heavy detail and spray 2 to 3 cross-hatched layers over mould surface with an airbrush and allow to dry.
We've established that we're going to be running silicone in these moulds today. Now these moulds in particular are best used with Pro Bondo. Now we're not going to be running those now, but I just want to illustrate, so maybe this can go back in with the previous take of step 1. I'm just going to illustrate how to apply Vaseline to this. So here I've got
So this section kind of bleeds over with step 1. I am applying release agent, but since it's a Bondo piece and I don't necessarily encapsulate those molds, one could argue that it's serving the same function.
Now I'll probably let that sit for 10-15 minutes. You will find that the silicone kind of almost absorbs the Vaseline. That's fine, that's exactly what you want it to do. So this is where our cap plastic brush comes into play. The idea is that some of these moulds, as you can see, have quite heavy detail in them. And the idea is that I want to get some cap plastic in there with a brush, just to ensure that I'm picking up all that fine detail and that I'm not going to get any release issues. Okay, so
I'm just going to talk about this part using this voiceover as my air compressor is quite noisy. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm running my cap plastic through my airbrush to create my top layer of the prosthetic. What I'm going to be doing is spraying in straight parallel lines so that each line slightly overlaps the last one, As you can see, as I spray, I start and end on the outside of the mould. So I'm making sure that my entire mould surface is covered. So also very important to remember that I am spraying flammable solvents with cap plastic, which is not the best thing for your lungs. So make sure you're working in a properly ventilated area. As you can see, I'm now rotating the mould so that my crosshatch layers build up get a good covering over the whole surface, and that I don't leave any gaps. Now, what you don't want to do is spray too thick or too thin. Here you can see me overspraying, which means that I'm not really following any particular pattern. There's probably too much solvent in there as well. Likewise, if you don't have enough solvent, you can get some cobwebbing. That means that the cap plastic is drying before it's hitting the mould surface and creating these cobweb structures on top.
Okay, so it's worth noting that IPA-based cap plastic will take longer to set, to cure, than acetone-based cap plastic, so bear that in mind. What I want to show here is that cloudiness that I talked about is now dissipated, and the mould has taken on a kind of nice satin, so it's neither shiny nor completely matte. It's taken on a satin feel. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see that my cap plastic is indeed thick enough. I've got a regular pin here. What I want to see is I want to be able to lift my cap plastic up and not to see any holes in it. So I'm happy my cap plastic is thick enough to provide a barrier for my silicone. Yeah, it's not so thick, which is, as you can see, so that it's going to kind of cause ugly edges or funny wrinkling. Now I may just press that back into place, and you can see that that's kind of soundly.
I hope that was informative and that you've been able to take something away from this video. Do carry on watching the rest in the series to get the full picture on how to use this system. And for more information, you can always visit studiosangeet.com. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram @studiosangeet.